I'm Stephen Koon, and welcome back to Apache Nifi. So today we're going to start a new Nifi flow, and let's go ahead and get started with that, shall we? So I want to create a process group, and we're going to call this one Aviation Data. Okay, so that's our new flow, or that's our process group name. Create that, and let's go ahead and dive into it. Now from here, we're going to collect some aviation data, and we're going to get it from an API. And that's how we're going to start collecting that data. So I came across one site known as aviationstack.com, and here they have API services available for a REST API, where we can consume data from their endpoints and get some information, which will be great for what we're trying to do. And the nice part about it is you can start under the free area, so you don't have to pay anything. 500 requests per day. Not a problem, and gets us to full aviation data and the real-time flights, which is the one we'll be playing with for right now. So that works for me. I created an account, got that all set up, got my API key, and I'm good to go. So let's jump back over to Nifi here, and let's start. The first thing we want to do is we're going to use the main processor we're going to use is the InvokeHTTP. So we have that guy. Now, excuse me, this processor is, we can trigger it with another processor. That's how we want to use it. So, and the reason is because we're going to use another processor to generate a flow file. So we'll get the generate flow file out there. And let's take a look at the text that we're going to need. So let me grab that. So to use the API, let's go back over here real quick, go to documentation. Over here, we see an example of getting started, right? Here's the endpoint, although for free users, you can only use the HTTP version, not the HTTPS. And the first thing we need to do is tell what endpoint we want to get information from. In this case, we want real-time flights. So that is the flight endpoint, and then we have to provide an access key with our key that's been generated, and we can reset those every time too. So that's what we're going to do. And then there's a couple of functions that we can, for parameters that we can add for different information that we want. So if we go back up here, real-time flights, we can see under the API endpoint for real-time flights, besides providing the basic information, we also have a limit that we can do. Now we can only do 100 total per request and get 100 results back because we're doing the free version. Offset lets it know where you want to start. What we're going to bring in is the active flights only, not the landed scheduled. We want to get active ones because there's some additional data we want to be able to get out of that when it's available. And you can see other things in here too that you can add, like do you want to filter to results by departure city or the arrival location? So in this case, the departure city, arrival city, and a whole bunch of other options as well, right? And then I think another one we're going to use in here, let's see, we are going to also, actually, I think we're just going to use limit, offset. We don't need offset. Flight date we don't need because we don't get that as an option. I've already played around with it. We don't get the option, and it provides today's anyways when we do it active because they're active flights. And I think we're going to be okay. If I change my mind, we'll see later. So you can see an example down here of your result that comes back. So you have the first part here that tells you there's a total of the total count of records available. How many are being sent to you? So you're limited to 100, so you can get the 100 out of here. And then you have the data portion, which has blocks of information on every flight. So this part is the first flight here, starts here. We have the arrival data, the airline data, or the departure data, the arrival data, the airline data, the flight, the aircraft, and if it has live data available, then you have that. And then you get the next record that moves on to the next one. So let's go ahead and get to setting this up in Nifi. first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and set up the InvokeHTTP. And what we want to do here is give ourselves maybe a friendlier name. So we're going to say get flights from API Aviation Stack. So I just know where it's coming from. And scheduling, we want to do this. So 500 times, I'm going to do about one pull every 3 minutes. That should be enough to not oversaturate how many we get per day. So we won't use them all up right away. And we'll get a steady stream every 3 minutes. And that'll be results of 100 because we're going to get all the results we can. We're going to use the get HTTP method. The URL we're going to do is, now one way we could do the URL is to, let's see here. If we go remote URL, we could just hard code it in here and we could say something like, we want this guy and this one. We know we can't use the S, so let's get the rest of it. Flights is the endpoint we're looking for. Get that question mark in there, access key, canvas space, there we go, equals, and then our access key in this case, that would be this guy right here, which was provided to us, and I'll reset this later, so it gives me a new one. And we could say from here, the next part we would do would be flight status, right? So, and flight underscore status equals active. And then just because, and limit equals 100, which is the max we can do for ourselves. And I think that's all we're going to really use. We just want active flights from around the world because time of day determines how many flights in each country there are as well. So we'll do that. Now, we could hard code it this way and it would work, right? So let's go ahead and say that, apply it. We don't have any other settings we want to change in there. And yep, good there. Let's just grab a processor to dump this to real quick so we can connect it up. And the response going there. You know what? We don't want anything else right now. We're not going to handle for anything else other than a response at this point. And we could run it. And we got a response back here. So list the queue. Take a look at this and did we do it right? And yes, we did. So we see we have, just like the example showed us, right? We have the information. There's a total of 14,119 records for the active endpoint. And here's our results down below. So our first flight starts here and ends somewhere right here. Now, one thing we notice right away is apparently not every flight has live information, live data, right? So we scroll down to the next one. This one doesn't either. And no, some of these do every once in a while. So I'm not sure the reason for that, but as long as some of them do, it'll be enough to play with later and do some extra stuff with this. And we'll see, it'll be easier to look at later to figure out what's going on. So let's go ahead and close this. So we know that works, but maybe I don't want this to be hard-coded like this. Maybe I want some of these properties to be filled in by when I have, so I could start off, maybe I was looking up flights, right? They do have an option in here for looking up flight information as well, or by country code, or by airports and stuff, right? To get information from those. And maybe you wanted to pass, maybe you had a list of airports you cared about and you want to collect data from those airports, right? For maybe flights going into those airports or whatever, using the active endpoint. We could do that. And we could just, what we want to do in this case, so, and I'll show you how we're going to do it. So the generate flow file will be our example. So we'll go ahead and generate flow file, or edit the options in it. And what we're going to do is add a couple changes to it. So Custom text we'll leave alone. What we want to do in this case is create ourselves a couple attributes for the flow file. First thing we want is the access key, because we know we need that. So let's go ahead and create one called access key. Make sure we have our access key as the value. That one's in there. And we know we want to see flight status as the other option. So we'll put that there, and flight status should be active. And just because we did it earlier, let's go ahead and add limit. Okay, so we're going to bring these three. We could add more. We could add one for every single parameter value that was available, but it doesn't mean we have to use all of them. So now, how are we going to use this? Well, this is what we're going to use to say every 3 minutes, give me a new, or create a new flow file. And this is how we'll control for right now when we make requests into this guy. So in this case, we want to change him back to 0sec. So he performs, and because we're creating a relationship, an input relationship now, that means this will only trigger the invoke once it receives something from the relationship. And that something is a flow file. So let's go ahead and do that. And because I want to save some space here so I can compact things a little bit more, I'm just going to put the queue over there on the side. Let's go ahead and get rid of this last one in the queue. And let's make our changes here to this. So inside the invoke, we're going to change our URL. And now we're going to utilize the Nifi Expression language and say, give us access key, and that's what we want you to populate it from. So the incoming flow file will have an attribute called access key, and we want you to recover that and use that to populate the value right there. Same thing with flight status. And there we go there. And the last one is going to be the limit. Okay, so one advantage here is much smaller string that we have to deal with now. And all these are dynamically populated. So depending on what's inside of the flow file is what we can use this with. Now, a good example of why this can be really helpful, I mean, I do this at work too, is I have APIs and we're using WebSec for these APIs. So I have a token bearer that I have to provide. So in this case, my access key could be my token, my bearer token that I need to pass on to it. But the way our token might work is maybe every 120 minutes, every 30 minutes, or whatever that timeline is, maybe I have to refresh and retrieve a new token. But I could use the same token during that window of 120 minutes. So I want to use the same one. I don't want to keep wasting I don't want to create overhead by hitting or requesting a new token for every single request, especially if I'm doing thousands or hundreds of thousands of requests into an API, where getting a new token would just put additional pressure on that WebSec service where I have to get the new token from. So what I want to do is maximize the token and use it for its entire life cycle. So that's where having a dynamic part to my string here makes it easier to manage that type of stuff. And maybe I have other stuff like values that I want to be able to change as well. So in the example I was talking about just now, I could have, maybe I had a select statement up here that retrieves the token from a database that I maybe temporarily stored in. And I use that to manage it. And then I add it to my flow file. And then I pass it on as I get down to the invoke part. So that would be an example why it's really nice to be able to create a dynamic link like this, where we can go ahead and pass things on. So let's go ahead and see if it works. Let's go ahead and create our first one. We see it got created. If we take a look at it, we can check the attributes here. We do see flight status is there, access key is there, so we're good to go. Now we should be able to pass it into the invoke. The invoke should run. And when it's done, let's go ahead and refresh that. We should get a response. We did get a response. Let's see if it's a favorable one. And there we go. we got the exact same response we did before, except now we got fresher data because we just requested it, and it's from active flights. And that was very cool. So that gives us an example of how to use the InvokeHTTP. Now, if we were using an HTTPS, it would be the same thing, right? We're going to populate it with the S on the end. That will use a secure method and communicate securely to the other server or to the API, and it would just work. We don't have to do anything special in here, and we're taking care of things. We don't need any other options in there right now. And let's see, let's go ahead and end it here. We got quite a bit done right there with the InvokeHTTP. I have been, just real quick, I've been taking a look at the comments in the videos. Definitely if you have questions or is there something you want to try to see that I should be able to squeeze in some stuff into these videos, how to use different processors that I haven't gotten to yet, or that I didn't have planned to get to yet. So definitely feel free to utilize comments there, and I'll see what I can do about adding your questions into the flows on how to utilize that stuff. So in the next video, we'll cover a couple different ways to move this data around, what we're going to do with it, clean it up a little bit, using some familiar processors and some new ways of doing it too. In the process, answer a couple questions. Well, I'll catch you next time.